Welcome to Behind the Numbers, the podcast that keeps you updated with football within the hobby. Just really excited about the show today. I have Ryan McDowell on of DLF Football. Ryan's helped me build my fantasy teams for over 10 years now at DLF, and I just really want to bring him on and get his dynasty ranks and compare them to our card values. And we had a great conversation around looking like some guys that are cheap, some guys that can sell. I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation. With that, the conversation was a little bit long, so I decided to go ahead and just kind of cut off the Prism, Optic, and Mosaic updates for you in terms of pricing. I will get you for that on the next show. However, I did have three things I did want to throw by you real quick that's kind of been on my mind when it comes to the football card market. The first one is I'm really worried about Select. Select just seems to be everywhere. It just seems the concourses and base rookies are falling down because there's a lot of them. And I just think this might have been Prism's try to test the market of what they could do in terms of how much they can print. And I do think that collectors are definitely noticing. I do think the abundance of color hits that aren't numbered is a little bit concerning. So just tread lightly with Select. Just kind of be careful with Select, kind of let it play out. It's still trying to be flipped. People are still paying premium to get in breaks. Just definitely kind of tread lightly with Select would be my advice to you. Stay to numbered stuff, not even color die cuts, not even any type of color. I would kind of gravitate towards only stuff that's numbered. So that's just my take on Select. The second thing I want to talk about was just PSA. A lot of stuff's coming out. It seems like they are starting to catch up. However, it does seem that they are getting harder on grading. A lot of people that are in the 75 to 80% range of gem rate are getting stuff back 40 to 55% gem rate. So if you're one of those people who's been waiting a long time for PSA to come back, just kind of brace yourself, because it just seems like it's not pretty. It seems like they're coming back and kind of readjusting their evaluations. And so with that, there's going to be more nines. You're not going to get the gems you're hoping for. So those numbers you're throwing around in terms of what your cards might be worth might not be that. So just keep that in mind when it comes back to PSA. And the other thing I just want to share is got a nice little personal ad PC collection here. I got a little Peyton Manning Flair Showcase Row 3 rookie card. I just like the Flair cards. I think that's more of just my time when I kind of was collecting back when I was younger. I have a couple Kobe Bryant Flairs as well, and I think they're really cool cards. Even though it's not the staple of Peyton Manning rookies, I definitely wanted to pick up some Peyton Manning rookies before his Hall of Fame induction. But with this, I'm just excited for this show. Please leave some comments to the show and follow me at numbers_behind. Proud member of Bench Clear Media, and let's get after it. Let's have fun with this.
If you've been in the hobby for more than a day, then you know how fast the sports card market moves. There are now more options than ever to buy, sell, and research your cards. One of the most frustrating hurdles in the hobby is the fees when selling your cards. You know, those other popular marketplaces, the ones with their average seller transaction fee of 10%, the ones that don't have the seller's interest in mind. Wait, what? Who would do that? Well, hold on to your horses. No, not those horses. Welcome to the Card Flip, a place where we want to provide a simple alternative to buying and selling cards. No clutter, just you, graded cards, sealed wax, and the easiest of transactions. So what do you say? Are you in? Great! Welcome to the Card Flip, the seller's marketplace.
Now for the part of the show that I'm extremely excited about. I'm excited to bring in Ryan McDowell of DL Football, a guy that I have followed for pretty much all of my Dynasty Football career. Listen to your podcast, Dynasty Blueprint, which is now Locked On Fantasy, Football Fantasy. But anyways, Ryan, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate you coming on and giving us that Dynasty Football perspective. Help us with our hobby.
Yeah, Tyson, glad to be on here. I was excited for this invitation. It's a little bit different than the shows I normally do, and that's a good thing. Definitely interested to hear your perspective and kind of share my thoughts too.
That's awesome. I'm going to blend the two. So, kind of my approach to this show and my approach to football cards is using that dynasty, knowledge to help make good decisions, help make little buys, even guys I just like. It's fun I've really found it fun to, like, for example, I have quite a few shares of Justin Jefferson. I find it pretty fun to blend that hobby and dynasty football stock that I have. So it's been kind of a fun blend for me. So I was excited to have you on the show, but thanks again. So I thought first off, we would just start off just because the rookies are still pretty fresh in our mind. Things are starting to settle, what rookie camp's going. I thought we'd just kind of dive into your rookie ranks a little bit, and I kind of have mine as well, just kind of throw them up with yours. What kind of stands up with the top 5 quarterbacks for you? I think you and I are pretty much chalk. We're the same. Trevor, Trey, Fields, Wilson, and Mac Jones. I guess actually the question I will ask you, do you have Lance at 2 based on talent or based on situation?
I guess I would have to say situation, because pre-draft he was my QB3, but
Okay.
I went into it. I mean, before the draft, we basically knew. I don't know. I guess there were still the Mac Jones possibilities to San Francisco, but I think a lot of people, as the draft got closer, thought it would be either Fields or Lance going to San Francisco, and I was basically of the mindset that whoever it is going to be my quarterback too. And if that was Mac Jones, maybe that wouldn't have been the case. But
Right.
That situation with Lance going there pushed him up and flip-flopped those two guys. But for me, they're super close in rankings.
Right. Yeah, I think just the Shanahan thing's really attractive. Obviously, he's had very good success giving a guy that actually can run as well. I think he can do a lot with that offense. He's probably one of the better offensive minds in the league. You think about him, you think about Sean Payton. And so seeing a guy like Lance, I think if Lance or Fields were there, they would have been my 2 for sure. I think I'm with you. Mac Jones, it would have been kind of a deeper discussion. We probably had a lot more variance in these top 5 just because Mac doesn't have, I think Mac could have been a really successful quarterback. I mean, he could elevate to what Jimmy's doing, but he just doesn't have the legs. And that matters now in fantasy quite a bit. What are your thoughts on Fields in Chicago? I think I might be a little more optimistic than some. I feel there's still people that are a little bit down on him. I feel like there's a lot of pieces there for him to work with. And I still kind of believe in Nagy. What are your thoughts on Fields?
I'm excited about him in Chicago as well. It kind of became a narrative or a big storyline, just how much he was being bashed pre-draft, probably probably undeservedly so. Yeah. And ultimately I was shocked that he fell that far. The Bears trade up for him, which I think was a smart move. But between those stories that we heard pre-draft and just honestly, the terrible history the Bears have at the quarterback position. Yep. I think those two things are kind of strikes against Fields when you're looking. I mean, whether you're talking fantasy football or you're talking about cards. So, if there's any dip in value, I would love to take advantage of that again in either opportunity.
Yeah, and I think when you compare it to me, you really have to look at things kind of long term. Like, for example, I look about Herbert. Like, Herbert had a phenomenal year. Herbert's really high in dynasty ranks, which we get to, but he's in the same division as Mahomes. It's going to hurt him. He's really going to cap his ceiling because I don't know how often the Chargers are going to be better than the Chiefs. I don't see that. And then you look at Fields right now. Chicago, by doing that, is really with what's going on with Rodgers. When Lions, Goff's not really the long-term answer for them, and the Vikings have Cousins. They're really the only team that has a positive young quarterback. We can talk about Jordan Love a little bit, but it seems like Green Bay is not sold on him. But it just seems like they might have put themselves in a position their Fields might be the best quarterback in 3 years in that division. So I think that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're not far. We're an Aaron Rodgers trade away from saying Justin Fields is the most talented quarterback in the division.
Right.
And we're even closer than that to saying he's the best Bears quarterback of the past 20, 30, 40 years, however far you want to go back, because it's pretty ugly. Jay Cutler had some production in there, but he wasn't really a strong fantasy asset and obviously didn't bring the success to the Bears that they would hope for.
For sure. And I think very similar to that conversation, Ryan, is the Zach Wilson landing spot. Jets fell in love with him, and you see a lot of the arm talent. You see a lot of kind of impressive things he can do. But then I'm also kind of under that weird, he's on the Jets, though. That kind of like what you were saying, that kind of bothers me. And then also Josh Allen's in that division. That there's another top quarterback that he's going to be going up against consistently. What's his ceiling? Is he kind of capped just like Herbert is? Or what are your thoughts on Wilson?
Yeah, I think there's just a little bit of concern about the unknown with him. Played out at BYU, did not a ton of casual fans, I guess, saw much of him. He feels, even though he had production and impressive production each of his years at BYU, he feels like a guy who kind of came out of nowhere. And his 2020 season was far and away better than anything else we had seen previously. So That and you're right. The Jets, even though we're talking about new leadership there, new coaching staff, there's still that concern that, are they the same old Jets? So it does seem like he is kind of locked into that QB4 spot, which is where you and I both have him for most people. That's what the ADP is showing us as well.
Right. Yeah, I'm intrigued by him. I do think he's saying a lot of the right things. Like a lot of interviews that I've seen and just like kind of the way he carries himself, I have been a little bit impressed with him. And Fields is already getting after it as well. Just I'm really excited to see kind of these guys play. Like the youth movement with the quarterback position across the league is pretty astounding. You look at, last year we have 4 guys from that class that are going to be starting, and the year before we're at, I think, 4 guys. So it's like we have, almost half the league is going to be 25-ish or younger. And so I think that's and you throw Darnold in there from 2 years ago because he's so young. It's just crazy to think about. Mac Jones 5, like not much to talk about. He probably is going to sit until Cam gets hurt, probably, but he'll probably get a chance. But there's not much to work with New England. That's what worries me. They don't really have much weapons for him. I'm a little bit worried about that part.
Yeah, I am too. Of course, they bring in the 2 tight ends that will help. And it feels like Mac Jones is the perfect quarterback for Bill Belichick and that offense. I think we'll see him, sooner rather than later. And it'll be interesting between Lance, Fields, and Jones, just how quickly these guys get on the field.
Right.
And I mean, I think back to last year, and coming on this show, you're obviously an expert, and you and your listeners know way more about the card market than I do. I'm just kind of very, very, very fringe follower of it. I enjoy it, same story as probably a lot of people that I collected when I was a kid and have kind of dabbled again recently, but not enough to know what I'm talking about really. But, just looking at and kind of, again, fringe following it last year, obviously everybody was chasing Burrow and chasing Tua, and what we saw in Dynasty is that Herbert fell as a result of that. Like sometimes he even fell to the second round of drafts in super flex drafts where you can start 2 quarterbacks. Yeah. And I noticed the same thing with very early on, again, like early release. I don't even know exactly when those cards first released, but everybody seemed to be after the top 2 guys, and Herbert was almost undervalued both in Dynasty and in the card market. Yep. And it seems like maybe we're going to do the same thing again this year with Zach Wilson and Mac Jones. And there, again, from both cards and fantasy, there's some advantages to be taken there.
Right. And then that's the fun part. And I think that's the fun part is seeing that trajectory. I was actually kind of mad because I'm a diehard Oregon fan, and I was kind of hoping that Tyrod Taylor would play more. I was hoping he'd last longer before getting his lungs punctured by the trainer. So I was hoping
we didn't see that coming.
Yeah. So I was hoping Herbert wouldn't be thrown in the fire so quickly. And then when he did so well at the gate, then once he kind of, especially with the Burrow injury and Tua kind of getting a little stagnant, Herbert just took off, and he's just been the guy. I'd say from about week 6 on, it was kind of everybody wanted the Chargers now, and that's kind of how it goes. And I think it's fun this year because I think that Hurts came late, and I think that this year there's, I'm not going to put Mac Jones there yet, but fantasy wise, there's 4 guys that could be difference makers. I think that if things get going with San Fran, if Fields gets going on the field, he could really use his legs and be an attribute to fantasy. And the Bears have a pretty strong following too in the hobby. So if he's anything good, he's really going to be hot. But yeah, it's going to be a fun year for quarterbacks for sure.
So do you expect?
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wondered. Do you expect the prices of those first 4 guys to be just crazy from the get go?
I would say it's going to be like Trevor Lawrence is going to be untouchable. Like he'll probably come out, I bet you, more expensive than Herbert in terms of his price in the hobby for sure. So he'll probably be up there when we get down to our values. I'd say he might be in Lamar Jackson top 2 or 3 values just because everybody kind of has him as a generational talent like the Andrew Luck type. Yeah. Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Zach Wilson, I think will be kind of clumped. I think it'll be kind of pick your poison who's playing well, but I could kind of see them being pretty close to maybe Kyler right now. And we'll get to Kyler. He's a little undervalued, but I think they could fall in that range. It does kind of depend where the market's at, but I do think those 3 are probably going to be the most chased. And then Mac Jones, I think he will be the Patriots are a strong hobby buy as well, but I do think that his like singles might be a little bit cheaper to start until they actually see something. Because I think there's a lot of, is he good enough to be just a thrower? That's kind of my quick rundown on that.
Yeah. Again, some parallels to fantasy football, I would say.
Right, for sure. In terms of, let's hit the running backs and receivers together here a bit. The running backs is kind of just three. I mean, there's always going to be some guys that pop up, like last year, James Robinson and Antonio Gibson. We can't get that far deep into it. But I mean, you and I are pretty much the same, except for you put Etienne at number 1 and switched Harris down to 2. I kept Harris 1 just because I felt like he was going to go to Pittsburgh the whole time. And then seeing what Pittsburgh's done with running backs just really excites me. I know their O-line's taking a hit and they might not be as strong as usual. I kind of feel like he might be the most productive out of the gate with a pretty strong hobby team as well. But what are your why'd you put Etienne first? What was your thoughts there?
Yeah. So again, this is from a dynasty perspective and thinking long-term. If we're just talking about redraft league or seasonal leagues, then I would prefer Harris. I think we're going to see a better year out of him in 2021. Basically has that backfield to himself. That Pittsburgh has tried to find some replacements for Le'Veon Bell over the past couple of years, and it hasn't worked yet. So this is certainly the closest they'll come. Right. But long term, I prefer Etienne. I just honestly think he's a more talented running back, more versatile back as well. We've already heard some of the ways that they're planning on using him. Maybe even split wide out as well as in the backfield. So. Yeah. Long-term prefer Etienne, short-term Harris. That's pretty much what it comes down to, but they're definitely close there.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing too. And obviously the Clemson connection was part of the draft pick. I think, definitely Urban Meyer's trying to get a culture change there. And he knows that those two are a positive piece of the culture. So I definitely feel you with that in terms of long-terms. What's your take on Javonte Williams? I know about him. I know he has some talent. I'm kind of worried about Denver though. I'm just not sure how successful he can be there. What's kind of your, let's say, best case Javonte Williams in the next couple of years? What do you think?
Well, I think from a fantasy standpoint, he's already more valued than Melvin Gordon for sure. And I don't know exactly what Gordon's contract looks like, but yeah, if that's favorable for Denver to move on from, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not even on that roster in week 1 and right. They just give the job to Javonte Williams. But long term, I mean, he's got some upside. Denver, big picture, has to fix quarterback. Of course, they've been rumored to be interested in Aaron Rodgers. So of course that would be a quick fix, but otherwise, if it's not him, or if it's not, I guess Deshaun Watson or someone like that, we're going to have another year of, I think, subpar quarterback play.
Right. So in a tough division,
exactly in a tough division. So, like Williams, upside there, like the situation with a lot of other young talented players on that roster, on that offense specifically. Mm-hmm. But it's all about quarterback, and they've got to get that figured out.
Yeah. So I wasn't asking you this because I've been a long time listener to you, and I remember you were. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm quite confident you were pretty big on Amari Cooper coming out in terms of his route running and just all those things. And so you have Devonta Smith at 5, and I have him at 2. Tell me what you don't see in Devonta that you kind of saw in Amari, or maybe why you have Devonta around 5 instead of closer to 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think there's just enough little concerns with Smith, like little knocks that he didn't have that production until his final year. He's a little bit older than we normally like to see prospects. Obviously, the size, I think is the biggest concern that we have just very rarely seen players of his stature make an impact in the league. And I mean, what we saw last year was just, it was the best wide receiver year in college ever, I think. Certainly the best. Right. Certainly the best I can remember. So, if anybody can overcome that size, he's already shown us he can. But transitioning to the NFL on that Philly offense, where we're still not sure what to make of Jalen Hurts, certainly as a passer. Exactly. There's just too many little knocks that pushed him down my rankings compared to some of the other receivers.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. How about, Jamar Chase is kind of the clear-cut one for most.
Yeah.
My question is, how close is your two? So for you, it's Jalen Waddle. Like, how close is he on a tier by himself, or do you have Waddle and him pretty close?
But Chase is on a tier by himself. I would say Jalen Waddle, who is my two, is closer to the rest of the guys in my top five. Rondale Moore, Rashad Bateman, Devontae Smith. He's closer to those guys than he is Jamar Chase. I already think Jamar Chase is a top 10, 12 dynasty wide receiver.
Yeah, he's going to be really impressive. If after, like, let's even say what you know about Jefferson now, do you like Chase or Jefferson if you were thinking about last year?
I mean, knowing what we know now, you have to take Jefferson. That was
right.
Again one of the best rookie wide receiver seasons we've ever seen. And I mean, I'm excited about Chase. I think, like I said, I think he's a top 12 dynasty wide receiver long term. But Justin Jefferson might be the wide receiver one. He certainly has a case for that, to be the top value guy in dynasty.
Definitely. So then let's talk about Rondale Moore a little bit. You have him a bit higher than most. You have him all the way up to 3. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, maybe a little bias there. He's a local boy to me here in Kentucky, and went up to Purdue to play.
That's right.
Yeah, I just think you look at what he did in his freshman year, and that that's going back away. We don't want to. We have to be careful to give too much credit, especially earlier in a player's career. But for me, I'm pretty much wiping out anything we saw in 2020 because of all the situation with COVID and everything else that was going on. Players were opting out, opting back in, opting out again. It was a little crazy. But Moore followed up that awesome freshman season with an injury, a big injury in his second year, unfortunately. So didn't really get to follow that up the way we had hoped or expected. But I love the landing spot. It might feel crowded in Arizona, but I don't really think it is. Like Andy Isabella just isn't going to get it done. I think AJ Green is toast at this point. And as much as I've been a pretty big Christian Kirk fan, but I'm starting to think he's not the guy that fantasy players thought he was either. So
he seems kind of be like a one-trick pony. He kind of just gets that deep ball every now and then, but that's it. I'm totally with you. I think the landing spot's actually really intriguing. I think he can easily be the receiver too there, like a very consistent to Hopkins. And I think AJ Green's going to have some value, like kind of like with Fitz. Like just they'll make some plays and do some things to help the team. But if Moore can get like move around the slot and get moved around, I think he could be really dangerous in that offense for sure. Yeah, and I mean he can run the ball as well. He can take carries. And I don't. It's not fair to mention Smith's size and not Moore's. He is undersized in his own right, but he's not a small guy. He's not a little guy, right? I mean, he's super thick. If you've seen the video of him, I think it was squatting 600 pounds. I mean, something just unreal. So he might be short, but he's not little. Okay. And the only difference we had, I mean, we had a mix-up a little bit in our 1 through 5, but the only guy you had in, I didn't, and was our number 4. You had Rashad Bateman, I had Elijah Moore. My thing against Bateman is like, it just seems like he lost that explosive step that he had in 19. Like it just seemed last year he wasn't quite explosive. Even some of the rookie camp stuff, he doesn't look super explosive. I'm really worried about his like separation ability. And so when it comes to the Ravens, I feel like Lamar needs that because of just he's not really a pinpoint guy. And so I'm a little bit concerned with him in that aspect. Elijah Moore is more like the reason I have him at 4 is just pure new regime, like new group. Wilson getting the same time as rookie cornerback, kind of getting that rapport going. And you just see a lot of upside at Ole Miss. I think he's kind of overlooked because the team wasn't very good. But what are your kind of thoughts on Bateman and Moore? Yeah, Moore would be 6 on my list for sure. So we're not too far off on him. I like him as a prospect and player as well. And kind of the same thing we were saying about some of the other guys. He could easily be the most talented and most productive wide receiver on that Jets team pretty quickly. Right. As far as Bateman, seemed like he lost some value due to that landing spot. A lot of people concerned about Baltimore. I'm not quite as worried,
But I do agree with you. What we saw last year from him at Minnesota was not the same player that we saw previously. I noticed they used him a lot more in the slot, and I'm not sure what the reason for that change was, because it didn't necessarily seem to be successful for their team or for him. So we'll get him back on the outside in Baltimore, I expect, and I think he can. I think he can perform pretty well. But yeah, really from 2 to 6, Waddle, Moore, both Moores, Bateman and Smith are all pretty tight for me.
Pretty tight. Yeah, definitely for me as well. Awesome. So the main reason I got you to come on the show, and you can see we've already kind of hit 20 minutes talking about rookies. That's the really fun part. But the reason I got you on the show is because I want to kind of go through each position of guys' kind of current rank and value. And I know that part you said you're kind of familiar with, but not super, but really tying it to your dynasty value. And so, for example, Patrick Mahomes is your 1. I'm just going to run through the prices and then we'll kind of talk about the group. He's going about 10 grand for silvers. He's the guy that's the cream of the crop. If you have a Mahomes silver, then you got a nice card. These are all PSA 10s. I have a silver Mahomes, but it's not a PSA 10. Josh Allen, he's about 950 to 1,000. He's number 2 for you. Lamar Jackson, number 3. He's at 950, right in that range, just under Josh Allen now. So Josh Allen's finally passed him. Lamar was ahead of him for most of it. Kyler's number 4 at 450 to 500. He's your rank 4, but you'll see he's not that in price. Herbert, your 5th, 800, 900. Prescott, 800 to 850. He's your 6th. Burrow, 7 at 650 to 700. Russ Wilson, he's a little different because he's an older quarterback, but 1,400 to 1,500, that's where the hobby difference kind of comes in. They don't care about the age. He's kind of accomplished a lot. And then you have Trevor Lawrence 9th on your overall quarterbacks list, which we don't have any hobby value for. So just looking at that list, so, we talked a little bit before backstage before we came on, like the guy that really stands out is definitely Kyler Murray. Anything else that stands out to you in that kind of group?
Yeah, I would say the first 2 things that stood out to me and are the gap between Kyler Murray and everyone else on this list. Really,
right?
He feels like a screaming buy in the card market based on this. I mean, the expectations from a fantasy standpoint, which really. Fantasy football should mirror the NFL, and the card market kind of does the same thing, right? But I don't know. I mean, what would you say is the reason for his lower value at this point?
I think maybe it's a couple things. I think he's just undervalued in general. So I think I don't think he's appropriately valued first. But the reason I think he is down a little bit is you kind of end the year with like a dud. They kind of got hurt. They missed the playoffs when they were kind of rolling. So they really skidded. So and then Arizona is also not a great market for sports cards. So he doesn't get a huge bump in that. And then just in general, it's a difficult division. The Rams are going to be super tough again. Seattle is always tough. The Niners are going to be coming back. So it's also, they could be the 4th team next year. So when it comes to quarterbacks in the hobby, it comes down to success, that they need to have some success and win some games. And I think there's a lot of concern of how can the Cardinals compete in that division, I believe.
Well, I think that is one big advantage that you have in the card market compared to fantasy players. If I look at a guy like Kyler Murray and I decide that in fantasy football he's undervalued, I can say, go buy Kyler Murray. Yeah. But I'm still in a league with 11 other people, and if the guy who has Kyler Murray agrees with me that he's a great player, he's going to have a breakout season, whatever, I can't just go buy him, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not that easy. It's not my decision, right? There's there's 2 people in this transaction versus the card market. Somebody's always willing to sell and always looking to sell. So that, to me, that's a big advantage you have in the card market compared to fantasy football. Sure. The other thing that stood out to me is the obvious gap between Mahomes and everyone else. I mean, we're talking about more than a 10x difference here. And of course, Mahomes is, he's easily the quarterback 1 in fantasy and in dynasty, but just surprised at the lofty price there compared to the other guys.
I mean, Brady's not on this list, but he's the most valuable. So you have a Brady rookie card. It's I should have looked it up. It's above Mahomes right now. The big discussion that we had coming into the Super Bowl was if Mahomes doesn't win this game, then Brady's basically untouchable in terms of legacy. Like if he doesn't. And so now it's kind of like Brady is essentially going to be the Mike Trout is in baseball right now for a rookie card of guys, the standard. That's the high number that you're trying to get to. Mahomes is on a different level. He is probably the most talented quarterback I've ever seen, just in terms of things he does on a consistent basis. And he has a Super Bowl already. I think that ability to win multiple will continue to drive that up. I still don't think he should be valued above Brady for a long time. We'll see what that happens. But yeah, the gap there is interesting for sure. There's some gains to be made by some guys if they can make a little bit more noise over the next year or two.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the other thing I would say, and I'm a little bit biased here being a Cowboys fan, I do think there's a lot of opportunity for Dak to grow just because of how strong he started last year before injury, even though a lot of it was catch up and they were behind. This is going to be hopefully, if he stays healthy, this is the first year he'd be with all of those talented receivers that they have. If that O-line can hold up, I just think that Dak's kind of a feel-good story on a big market. So I think that could definitely really he could grow. I think if the Cowboys have a little bit more success, I could see come back with broken leg. People like the feel good stories as well, so you kind of play the emotional piece. But I can see Dak gaining some value for sure.
He was the other one that slightly surprised me, being basically the same as Herbert, kind of in line with Lamar Jackson and even close to Josh Allen as well. From a fantasy standpoint, I think he's always been undervalued. Part of it was he wasn't the first round draft pick like most of these quarterbacks were. He didn't enter the league with the expectations, and I mean, I'm sure 5 years ago you could have gotten his rookie cards for next to nothing before we saw him step onto the field. We seem to be a little stubborn as fantasy players to be really slow. And of course, I mean, he's still valued as a top 10 quarterback in Dynasty fantasy football, but he's not typically talked about with in the range of Allen and Lamar and Herbert, for whatever reason. And of course he had the injury last year as well. So all those things combined, I'm surprised his value is up, but I mean, when he's been healthy and on the field, he's played like a top quarterback. So that it does make sense, big picture.
We'll see if you disagree with me or if there's another guy that maybe comes to your mind. It could be even a guy off your list. Because obviously we could talk about we'll say no rookies, but anybody come to your mind that could really make a big jump in your rankings this year? And to me, just from the list I'm seeing, I think that Burrow has a pretty good ability to climb. If he does come back healthy, if he comes back to form, I think he definitely could settle in around Lamar, Josh Allen, if he does get going with Chase and company. But do you have any kind of guys off the top of your head that you could climb your ranks?
I mean, for me, I would kind of look to the younger guys. You said no rookie, so I'll go with second-year guys instead. Jalen Hurts. I mean, we saw him, of course, in the season on a crazy hot streak. He averaged over 30 fantasy points for 3 straight games before he was somehow pulled in that Week 17 game. So, if he can continue, he's not going to average 30 fantasy points for the full season. But if he can come close to that production and basically show that he's the real deal, then I'm sure his market would grow like crazy. And then Tua Tagovailoa, we've already seen the market for him as he came into last season as that hyped rookie, and along with Burrow, he was the guy that everybody was chasing as they were ripping packs and things. And I think his value's probably dropped since then. His card value has, his fantasy value has as well. So you don't see him here on the top 10 quarterbacks, but same thing. If he can improve on that rookie season, they've added some weapons there in Miami, then I would expect his value both in cards and in fantasy to kind of get back to where it was last summer.
Yeah. I definitely think Tua is a good one as well. Let's move to running backs here. I'll just kind of read through your ranks with the pricing. We'll kind of talk about where to go from here. I mean, definitely we're going down a notch in terms of the dollar signs. But Christian McCaffrey, you still have one off his injury year, 320 to 400 is his PSA 10 right now, out of 2017. Jonathan Taylor is year 2. He's at 160 for PSA 10. He just had those are like newly graded, so they might be a little bit high right there. Barkley, 250. He's your 3 for you. Kamara, number 4 still for 200. Cooks 5 for 220, and then DeAndre Swift's your 6, and he actually didn't have much graded, so I just put his raws about $35 is where he's at. So he's pretty cheap. People aren't really on the DeAndre Swift bandwagon yet. What kind of sticks out with that group? And the one thing I will ask you is, what would it take for Barkley to get 1? And I ask that because it just seems like we've had so much expectations on him, and we've seen the talent just hasn't really all come together with the team and the situation.
Yeah.
Do you think we're overreaching? Do we have too high expectations for him, or do you think he can get there?
I think the expectations have kind of come down after the injury issues, and I think his value has come down as well. I mean, he was certainly challenging Christian McCaffrey to be that RB1 in fantasy and Dynasty, and then these injuries just have people concerned. So, I mean, a healthy high-level season could certainly put him back at that one spot or pushing for that one spot. And as great as Christian McCaffrey is, fantasy players are pretty fickle when it comes to the running back position. And, once you get 25, 26 years old, certainly older than that, then we're kind of ready to move on. So I think McCaffrey is like ripe to be picked off for that RB1 spot, whether it's Taylor or Barkley, maybe it's DeAndre Swift, maybe it's Cam Akers or J.K. Dobbins or Antonio Gibson. We saw so many great rookie running backs from last year that could continue to gain value. And again, I'm talking both fantasy and cards. So that's what stands out to me is the Swift price. Again, we kind of talked about that off the air, and I would assume they're not listed here on my ranks, but I would assume the guys that I just mentioned, Akers, Dobbins, Gibson, those guys are probably in that same price range.
Right there. I think Akers, people in the hobby right now tend to like Akers more than Swift actually. Gibson is kind of, I'd say, right in the Swift realm in terms of value, like not getting much graded, and when grading's getting more expensive, people are being pretty selective in what they grade. Of that list that I look at, if we're like suggesting a sell, it might be Kamara for me. I actually have a lot of shares of Kamara in Dynasty, and I'm just really worried with no Breeze that those easy PPR points aren't going to be there, and his production is going to take a dip. So I am a little bit concerned about him. So I could seeing that Cook's a little bit more valuable than him makes sense to me. But also I can kind of see Kamara start to fade as a player possibly. I do think he has a long-term skill set. I don't think he's the guy that's going to leave. He's going to be 1 year, he's going to be gone. I just think that massive production isn't going to be there again. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think that Taylor, I said a couple of shows ago, I think he has capability of being a 2,000-yard rusher. I think he could do that if the Colts really commit the run like they did towards the end of the year. I mean, I think you probably know better than me. I think he had 900 yards in 5 games. So, I mean, he's shown that he can do it, and he's used to that Wisconsin of just, carrying the load. Now, that's probably not going to be sustainable for a 5-6 year career. But Taylor's definitely interesting in the hobby to me next year for sure.
So we talked about so many things that are kind of parallels between cards and fantasy. So let me ask the dumb question that looks like it's not a parallel. I mean, when we're building fantasy teams, we're typically focused on running backs and wide receivers first. And then quarterbacks are honestly kind of a dime a dozen, unless you're playing that super flex format where you need 2 of them. That's not the same in cards. So, and I get it. I mean, the quarterback is the star of, the star of most teams and the biggest name player. So I get that they would be valued in general over the other positions. But when you have that established productive star player, like some of these names on this list that have been have been strong producers for multiple years. I guess I'm just surprised that they're not closer to that quarterback price range. So,
Yeah.
is it kind of that simple that we just value quarterbacks above all else?
It is. It really is, to be honest with you. Like, even you look at Jerry Rice rookie cards versus Joe Montana, they're probably 4 or 5x more for Montana. Just the quarterback just gets that kind of clout, even over the all-time greats. The Calvin Johnsons, the Randy Mosses, like there's some weird parallels with that too, being a little bit more, I don't want to say junk wax era, but like kind of closer where there's more production. But I would say that since I've gotten into this and followed this a little bit closer, the run back receivers have slowly risen, actually gotten some value. I think before it was just kind of like quarterback only. People wouldn't even grade the other cards. And so I do think that we are starting to see a little bit of a trickle down. But I asked the same question because, like you said, we all build in terms of fantasy. Running back, receiver is your core. Quarterback's cool. I'll take the seventh guy, whatever. He's just going to be 2 points a game difference in the top guy. We'll be fine. Definitely, the quarterback is just kind of the GOAT when it comes to the card values. But
okay, that makes sense. Forgive the novice question there.
No, it's confusing sometimes because then you think that pitchers in baseball are so important, but they're not valued that way. Like people, they don't value pitch, and a lot of it's injury based. I do think a lot of it's based on injuries. A lot of pitchers have Tommy John. A lot of pitchers get hurt. A lot of running backs get hurt. A lot of receivers get hurt. Quarterback's a little more sustainable too. People feel safer with it as well.
Yeah, maybe it comes down to it's as simple as what we see the most. And if you're watching a game, you're going to see the quarterback. You're seeing the quarterback every single play. If you're watching a baseball game, if you're a baseball fan, you're watching games every day. You're seeing a pitcher every fifth game, right? Every fifth day.
Yep. Exactly.
But you're seeing Mike Trout every single day, and so on. So maybe it's that simple.
Yeah. So let's jump into your receiver ranks. So my favorite position, AJ Brown, you have 1, Justin Jefferson 2, Metcalf 3. Brown's 300 to 320 for his PSA 10 out of 2019 Prism. Jefferson's 240 to 320. Just got some kind of coming out being graded for Jefferson. Metcalf also out of 19, 200 to 220. CD Lamb 150. Devontae Adams 500 because he's an older guy, but that's why he has his values higher. Tyreek 250, and then you have Jamar Chase at 7, which obviously we don't have any values for. Kind of looking at that group, what kind of stands out in terms of the card value to you compared to your ranks?
By CD Lamb, like right now. I rank him that highly as a guy coming off of his rookie year because I expect him to continue to improve. I expect him to not just have the value of some of these other guys on the list, but the production as well. And if that happens, I'm assuming his price is going to be in that same range, potentially doubling or more to kind of match Jefferson and Brown.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you about Brown, just because my only concern with Brown, and he's probably one of my favorite receivers to watch in terms of his approach to the game, my ball mentality, just the way he plays. And it reminds me of like kind of Anquan Bolden, just like it's mine. I really like that. I'm just concerned about the Titans as a group. Like, how long is Tannehill going to be? Just like, how long is he going to be good? What's their plan after that? Is he still going to be good at when they do try something else? Because I feel a little bit better about Metcalf in that realm. Russell Wilson, I don't think he's going anywhere, but I think he'll be playing for a while. CD Lamb, I think Dak's will be playing for a while. Adams, what's he like after? I really like the QB marriages. So like if it doesn't look it's long term, it kind of worries me. But in terms of like AJ Brown, and we can say maybe Devontae Adams, do you have any worry about their kind of long term because of the quarterback situation?
Really with Brown, more worried about just about the offense in general. They lose their offensive coordinator, moves over to the Falcons, and he kind of had the magic touch, right? He gets the best the career season out of Ryan Tannehill. Derrick Henry rushes for 2,000 yards. Obviously, AJ Brown had his true breakout season. Corey Davis finally had a good year. Johnny Smith started the season out on fire. I'm kind of worried they all take a step back. I do think AJ Brown is on a different level than all of those other guys, his teammates, maybe other than Derrick Henry. So I think he can overcome that, but I'm worried they're not going to match that same type of efficient offense.
Yeah. I think if you and I talked like a year ago, I would have DK Metcalf number one no matter what. And I was a little bit underwhelmed with his year last year. I think he still showed some great play. He's still showing a lot of talent. I mean, you still have him 3, but he didn't really take that massive step I thought he was going to take. So I kind of really agree with your rankings in that aspect. CeeDee Lamb will be really interesting because Cooper's not going to be there forever. So when he is the number one guy too, like the sky's the limit for what he can do. So I'm with you 100% to buy there. Tyreek Hill has always been a really interesting price point when it's come to receiver rookie cards. I think some of it's the off the field stuff. I think people don't really want to invest in the guy because of that in the hobby realm. And then I just think he might be one of the, I don't want to say safer, but I think that his skill, I don't see it going away anytime soon. Like I think he can do what he's doing for a long time. And so I do think that sustainability, if they win another Super Bowl or maybe 2 more, I think that he could get a nice bump from that as we slowly forget about the weird off the field stuff that's not confirmed, kind of confirmed. Like,
right.
So,
yeah. Always a touchy subject for sure. I guess I'm surprised to see the gap in his value compared to Adams. Those guys kind of valued the same way in fantasy football and Adams being double the value here in the card market. Let me ask another dumb question then. You've talked about with Brady, with Russell Wilson, with Adams, basically those guys have been in the league longer, leading to some higher value in their cards. So what's the market like in general once we either see the decline in play, like we talked about maybe with some of those running backs that they might be, kind of nearing the plateau potentially, or just when they retire, if Rodgers retires and he says, I'm done with the Packers, I'm just going to retire, or Brady retires,
Rodgers
do we see a dip?
So I don't think he does. No, the quarterbacks don't really see a dip. So a couple things to that question. So Rodgers, off the top of my head, he's probably close to 3K for his rookie card. So he would be still under Mahomes because Mahomes he might be overpriced, but Rodgers has done it longer. I think a lot of people just think Mahomes will be able to do it long, which I believe in it too. But yeah, so those older guys, their value kind of stays. I think the decline is more for example, a Michael Thomas decline. I think that does dip more because he kind of had a very productive time, but now it just kind of fell off and people are really worried about him. So I think that he was the top receiver started last year in terms of value. He was in the 300 range. And then guys for example, the receivers, Larry Fitzgerald, he's way more than these guys because Larry Fitzgerald is a Hall of Famer. His PSA 10 rookies are going to be over all these guys, probably even over Adams. I think depending on if it's his Topps Chrome or not, it's probably going to be, I'd say close to 800, 900 range for a Hall of Famer locked in guy. So if a guy like Alvin Kamara, he's been very productive, but overall it's a relatively short window. If he falls off the cliff, his card value is probably going to do the same thing. His card values are going to do the same. I believe so. Yeah. When you have guys when it comes to running back, especially, you kind of think about guys like Adrian Peterson that did it for a really long time. And still was productive, even his little short stints of their teams. His rookie cards people still kind of like him because he was long term. So it needs to be more of a long term career for sure to not lose that dip. So Devonta Adams, if he starts to slide a little bit next year and the year after, he might have done enough with the Packers long term to still kind of hold a higher receiver ranking in people's mind of wanting that card. And that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah, so that's another parallel because in fantasy, in Dynasty, we really want these running backs for about 3 years and then we're ready to move on. So I would tell a Dynasty player, now's a great time to sell Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook and maybe even Christian McCaffrey. And it sounds like I would tell a card collector the same thing.
Exactly. And that's why I want to have you on. And like you said, buy CeeDee Lamb. You think he has potential to be the number one guy. And receiver is definitely, I think, a longer term thing, as we know in fantasy and the hobby world. So those type of plays is exactly why we're doing this.
Perfect. I love it.
Yeah. So I think that was a huge meat of what we wanted to go over. And I just want to throw the quarterback question I talked to you before the show. I'll talk about Drew Lock. I'm going to come out with an article this weekend. I'm going to talk about 5 quarterbacks that either things didn't change, which is good, or things changed for them in a good way. And I thought I wanted to talk about Drew Lock because they didn't draft a quarterback. They didn't bring anybody in. They haven't got Rodgers yet, but they got a running back. They got O-line help. They have Sutton coming back, Judy's second year. It does seem if he can put it together, he's in a situation that he could succeed. I think he does have some arm talent. I don't know if he has the full quarterback picture that you hope for.
Yeah.
But I think he's just a guy to watch in the hobby. His cards have dipped. Like when his first year, Ryan, him and Daniel Jones were like kind of just under Kyler for a long time. Coming into the year, those 3, all of them were about 1,000 for their PSA 10 coming into the year. The card market was, and I was saying sell Locke, sell Jones. I just don't believe in Daniel Jones at all myself. Maybe that's some Cowboys bias, who knows? But yeah, so I think Drew Lock's definitely got to watch in terms of something could happen there for his card values. They've kind of tanked. He gets a couple wins under his belt. The Broncos get going. There's opportunity there. Do I think that's happening? I wouldn't bet on it, but he's got opportunity. And then you kind of want to talk about Tua a little bit more? Or do you want to talk about Lock?
No, I don't want to talk about Lock. I would say kind of echoing what I said earlier about Tua. I think he's set up to bounce back from what was viewed as kind of a disappointing season. But when you think overall about that rookie season, he's coming off a hip injury. Overall, we were surprised he was even on the field, let alone starting games. The Dolphins have retooled that receiver core. They bring in Will Fuller. They bring in Jalen Waddle. I think both of those guys are suited to Tua's game. So, and one thing I like to do from a dynasty standpoint is I want to chase those players who have already shown me that they can have some value. They've already had established value. Maybe they've lost that value, but there's a path for them to bounce back and to regain that. That's why I am still kind of on Daniel Jones a little bit. He's had the value. I think he could regain it once again. So I'm still a little bit of a buyer on Daniel Jones.
Well, he has
but
weapon.
Right. I certainly am. Yeah, I certainly am with Tua. And I think the other guy I wanted to ask you about kind of where he stands in the card market is Baker Mayfield. Another guy who had the best season of his career. They didn't really do too much. The Browns didn't to add to his add to his weapons. They get the speedster out of Auburn, I think in the third round, I believe, Anthony Schwartz. But overall, they're pretty much bringing back what they had last year. But Baker, like the names we talked about, the quarterback position earlier, a former top pick, and I would think that would help his value in both areas. Like how much are his cards typically, his rookie cards?
So like I said, when I did our list for your stuff, I didn't update his in my mind, but he's been consistently about half the price of Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen in that class. And I think that he's been undervalued for a while. We talked about it in the playoffs after his playoff win. However you want to take it or not, Shani, one of the guys that comes on my show quite a bit, he's a big Steeler fan. That Browns win over the Steelers was massive for that franchise to get off the deck and actually show a pulse to establish himself. And I think Baker's a big reason of that. He hasn't done a ton like that's Mahomes-like, or he's not just putting up crazy numbers. But what I was impressed about that Steeler game that really kind of sold me that Baker's undervalued is when it was 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 4, they're throwing. Like he was converting and moving the chains of the Steelers to make sure they kept the ball and not just pack it in and hope to hold that big lead. They were still putting the ball in his hands. And, if OBJ ever comes back to anything close that he was, and I do think that Baker is undervalued in the hobby as well. That's a good call for sure.
Nice. I would say the same in fantasy. He's I think he's down at he's quarterback 17 in our latest ADP. So that's pretty good value there, I think.
Yeah. Awesome. So, I'm just again, thanks for coming on the show. I really was excited for this show for a long time. I know that you're getting ready to wind down as a teacher in Kentucky. So definitely enjoy the summer. Definitely have a beer for me. And
I'll do it.
I appreciate you coming on the show. Oh,
Yeah,
wait, sorry.
thanks,
So,
Tyson.
do you want to plug where people can find your content and your work?
Sure. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23, and you can check out all of my work at dynastyleaguefootball.com.
Perfect. All right. Thanks again, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tyson.